Bom dia a todos, sejam bem-vindos aqui a este webinar organizado pela ABSOLAR, com apoio da Universidade Hebraica de Jerusalém. Eu sou Guilherme Susteras, eu sou conselheiro da ABSOLAR e coordenador do Grupo de Trabalho de Direção Distribuída. E hoje a gente vai falar sobre as inovações tecnológicas de Israel. Israel é o lugar onde muitas tecnologias, muitas inovações tecnológicas nasceram, e ela é reconhecida globalmente como uma startup nation, uma nação de startups. Marcas mundiais como Waze, Wix e Ituran nasceram nos laboratórios de pesquisa de Israel. E também foi em Israel que muitas inovações na agricultura foram criadas, por exemplo, o método de irrigação por gotejamento, que é o que permite fazer as plantações no meio do deserto. E alguns produtos que talvez vocês conheçam também foram criados em Israel, por exemplo, o tomate cereja e a melancia sem caroço. Por conta desse DNA de inovação, as principais empresas de tecnologia do mundo, como Apple, Microsoft, Intel e Google, têm seus centros de pesquisa e desenvolvimento lá em Israel. No setor de energias renováveis, Israel também se destaca no desenvolvimento de tecnologias tanto em geração como em armazenamento. Hoje a gente vai fazer essa nossa primeira conversa para que a gente possa aproximar os associados da ABSOLAR com esse mundo de inovação que está sendo desenvolvido em Israel. A primeira, espero, de muitas conversas que a gente possa ter para fazer essa aproximação entre Brasil e Israel. Hoje comigo, também está aqui comigo pela ABSOLAR, o Rodrigo Sawaia, nosso presidente executivo. Bom dia, Rodrigo.
Olá, Susteras, bom dia a você, bom dia a todas e todos que nos acompanham online, já estão entrando aí, participando. Também desejar aqui o meu bom dia do Brasil, my greetings from Brazil, para os nossos participantes internacionais. Um prazer estar aqui com vocês hoje para a gente poder aprofundar um pouco mais esse lado da tecnologia e da inovação no setor solar fotovoltaico, que é um setor, Susteras, que investe muito em pesquisa e desenvolvimento. Entre todas as fontes renováveis, é o setor que mais investe em pesquisa, desenvolvimento e inovação. So it's a pleasure to be here with you all today, and I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Então, apertando a tecla SAP, vou mudar para o inglês para a gente trazer para a conversa nossos convidados internacionais. Então, switching to English, let me introduce our Israeli participants. With us today is Yosef Abramovich, president of Gigawatt Global, a renewable energy impact investment company. Mr. Abramovich has been acknowledged by CNN as one of the top 6 global green pioneers and is also a Nobel Peace Prize nominee for his work. Mr. Abramovich, thank you very much for being with us today and welcome.
Shalom from Jerusalem. Thank you.
Shalom. And last but not least, I introduce Professor Leo Zetgar from the Department of Chemistry at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He leads research in the design and production of solar cells using new materials and new architectures, including semi-transparent cells for use in windows and photovoltaic screens that allow charging electronic equipment from the ambient lighting. Welcome, Professor Edgar, and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you very much. Pleasant to be here. Thanks.
Switching back to Portuguese for just a second, eu queria encorajar todo mundo aqui da plateia a mandar suas perguntas através do chat e a gente vai coletar e vai fazer essas perguntas aqui para os nossos participantes. So back to English, let me start with the first round of questions, starting with Mr. Abramovich. In your opinion, what new technologies in our renewable generation and energy storage do you expect to have the greatest impact in the coming years?
Okay, so it's very exciting time. I'm just back from the United Nations COP27, in which Israel presented many of the technologies. Already our solar fields in Israel are using solar-powered robots without water to clean. We're using algorithms that are constantly monitoring to be able to increase the efficiency of the field up to 4% more. But clearly the storage and dual use are going to be really big. What we are seeing today as the most innovative that anybody can do, and we encourage you in Brazil to look at it, are the panels that are bifacial, two-sided, and then to be on trackers, depending on single axis or double axis, depending on where in Brazil you are. But you're able to then compete and produce more energy and live with some of the tariff restrictions that have historically been in Brazil. So that's already being implemented. In terms of storage, the first region in the world to be 100% powered by the sun during the day and soon the night is from the Red Sea to the Dead Sea, including Eilat. And we have a pilot with a company called Ogwind that is, instead of batteries, forget about lithium, that's what everybody else is doing. But we're innovating here in Israel, compressed air underground, like blowing up a balloon using solar panels to, and at night you let the air out and it turns the turbine. We just awarded $2 million in climate solution prizes with a consortium. I was fortunate to be a judge on that. So everyone's talking about hydrogen. I'm actually relatively suspect of a lot of the hydrogen advocacy because you need methane, you need piping, you need things that the oil and gas companies love. But we saw some great storage technologies with hydrogen that would be green, using boron to be an accelerator to bring down the cost, and obviously splitting the water atom using renewable energy. Salt water-based batteries also will be 1/10 price of Elon Musk's gigafactory batteries, and there's more research going in there, which is very exciting. And one last thing that I'll mention, because I think it's relevant to Brazil, is dual use of land, agrovoltaics. In other words, you have a huge agricultural sector, a lot of mid-sized and poor farmers, small farmers. And we're not saying either or, like, please stop cutting down the Amazon. Okay, thank you. Don't clear any more, trees and things like that. Instead, use your agricultural land with the crops underneath in creative ways by having another layer of the photovoltaics. That's called agrovoltaics. And we have about 150 pilots that are about to start all over the country here in different climates and with different kinds of fruits and vegetables that will be done underneath. So there's a lot of innovation, and we want to welcome Brazil back into the Good Climate Actors Club.
Really great, and it's interesting how all these innovations is a mix of hardware, chemical, software, and application, really, and a bit of architecture. It's really, really great to see so many things coming on. Maybe we can come back to to talk about those pilots on agrovoltaics. It would be very interesting to hear about them. But first, let me ask Professor Edgar a question. So, what novelties have you been working on, and when should we expect them to be available in the market?
Okay, so I think the academia, let's say, or what we are doing in my research are giving some solution which you don't have today in the photovoltaic field. And I will also give example to the agro photovoltaic, which actually today I think the solution is not the optimal completely, because you are covering some of the field with photovoltaic, and then you are not getting use of those areas. So actually, one of our technologies is to make solar cells that can be used some of the light to generate electricity, but some of it will go through the solar cell to keep the photosynthesis of the plants there and the tomatoes and everything. And this is one of the technologies actually. Additional things that we can think of and we are doing today is the semi-transparent solar cells, which means that you can use them as a windows for built-in integrated photovoltaic, for example. And then you can even control the transparency of the solar cell, and by that you can get use of any building. And those are two completely relevant to Brazil, of course, if we're talking about buildings and putting them in the city, or for agriculture, as also Joseph mentioned before. And the last one, last interesting technology that we also developed is related to use the indoor light to generate electricity, which means that you can use the artificial light that you have anyway in your office, which is open all day, usually for hours and hours, and consume energy. But you can like recycle the energy and generate energy from those kind of lamp, and you can do it very efficiently, even more than the outside, if you can tune the optical properties. And this is breaking the rules in the PV because we are not using the same materials, which are limited usually by the spectrum of the artificial light of the outside. And those technologies, if you are thinking how much time it will get to the market, those are 3 new companies that actually established already. And I assume it will take between 4 to 5 years until we will see something to product. Maybe in the artificial light it will be sooner, but it really depends finally on the funding and how fast you can do it.
And in your view, this technology that's being developed in Israel, would it be manufactured in Israel, or is something that will be manufactured globally, China, or can be manufactured elsewhere?
Once we have, and in Israel, it's quite often happened. Once you have the technology and it's working, you have the prototype and everything, the manufacturing not necessarily needs to be in Israel. And one of the options, of course, it's Brazil, which has much more capacity, much more ability to do it than Israel.
Great. In fact, I just saw yesterday in the interval of the Brazil match, there was an advert from Samsung television, and they are already announcing that their remote control is no longer battery powered; it's indoor lighting powered. So, and also I remember when I was a kid, there was those Casio calculators that had a very small cells. So it's back to the future. It's really great to see. And I'm really looking forward to not having to charge my mobile anymore, my cell phone anymore, because it's always running out of battery. So I'm really excited about these technologies there.
Yeah, the main issue with those actually sources was that they were really low efficiency because you didn't want to make the calculator too expensive. So you put like amorphous silicon there, which is maybe 1-2%. So you need something more efficient that will work under this light and cheap, of course.
Fantastic. So, Sawaya, from what you're hearing here, in your opinion, how will the Brazilian market react to these innovations? What opportunities do you foresee for the application of these technologies in our market?
Well, Susteras, first, it's great to see some of these innovations that are coming closer to reality and becoming available in different markets in the world, and also that will soon enough come to Brazil. You know that Brazilians are known for their creativity. So I believe that we'll definitely find ways to use these technologies in new applications and new products that are eventually not foreseen in the first run. Also, we have the opportunity to include some of these controllers that are used indoors and outdoors to help activities in a country that's continental in size without the need of using the electricity infrastructure, the grid infrastructure, transmission and distribution lines. This can have a lot of positive impact, for example, on cattle. So if we need to keep track of cattle, we need devices that don't run out of battery. You can GPS your cows away in the field and know where they are pasturing and where they are staying and how to manage them on a more efficient way. You can also use this to help on surveillance and vigilance activities in our country for our borders, which are huge. We have one of the biggest borders in the world. And we know that some of these borders in the Amazon region, for example, they are hard to keep track of. And they are sometimes used as a way to bring weapons, illegal weapons, or illegal drugs into the country. So I believe there is an opportunity there for defense and support of our border activities. Additionally, Joseph Abramovich well mentioned the use of bifacial solar modules, right? Good news is that our large-scale projects, such as the big power plant that's behind his head on the background of his image, we can see them already being used in Brazil with trackers, one-way trackers, right? So one-axis trackers. And this is actually becoming the norm for large-scale solar projects, because it brings more productivity of the same investment that you do on the equipment. So you maximize your return for the capex that you have in the field. So this is becoming a reality as well. And I would just like to highlight not only agrivoltaics, which I believe it's a great opportunity for us to develop. And in Brazil, Embrapa might be a strong partner for the Hebrew University when we talk about the possibility of bringing pilot projects online in Brazil using resources available from Embrapa. So this is a suggestion for Professor Leos. Maybe he can find some financial support and partners there at Embrapa. But also Susteras, we have the off-grid systems and off-grid market. About 1 million Brazilians still live without any access to electricity at all. In the Amazon region, the most part of them. So we can bring solar electricity and solar also technology applied together with electricity. So information technology, satellite internet, education, and new business opportunities to these remote areas which were in the past basically out of any support.
Indeed, and combining all these agrivoltaics with this storage, with compressed air or whatever technology, we can start talking about off-grid microgrids, which would be a really, really interesting way of improving the quality of life of our people in the countryside. So, eu queria encorajar a plateia a continuar mandando suas perguntas aqui para a gente no chat, para a gente poder engajar vocês também nessa conversa. So, for our next round of questions, I'll start with Professor Edgar. So what do you see as the key barriers for the introduction of new technologies? What would be necessary, in your view, to reduce the time frame between a technology being demonstrated in the lab and then being successfully deployed in the marketplace?
Yeah, I think let's say one of the expected answer for this will be the funding, of course, because finally, if you want to accelerate something from the lab to the market, will be some funding, because finally we have the solution, we have the proof of concept for a lot of technologies. The question, I mean, is to get the right funding, and I will mention it in a minute, and of course the right human resources to do it. And sometimes, and I think this is what is quite actually typical in Israel, you need to give some funding to some risky ideas. Okay, not everything when you hear it in the first time sounds to you, okay, it will go to the market, but if you don't give it a chance, you will never know. So of course you need to make all the consideration and calculation, but the idea to go to some more risky things will result finally with new technology. Of course, the best way is to say, let's keep with the current PV technologies that everyone knows, the current materials, the current fabrication ways, and do this in a bifacial, improve a little bit here, or do it in certain angles. But if we want to go to something new, it's something that people don't know. They don't know how they behave for long term and everything. And here a risk needs to be taken. And I think the funding is the ones that will make the time frame from something in the lab to the market much shorter. Of course, with all the considerations, but it's something that we need to think of.
Interesting how the grass is always greener on the other side, because here in Brazil we call Israel as the startup nation, and we always complain how in Brazil we don't have access to funding for R&D. And then we are hearing that Israel is the startup nation, but also has funding constraints, because everywhere there are constraints, right?
No, think about it that here you don't have just three, just for example, I don't know, 3 new ideas that you need to find. You have like hundreds, and then you need to select the one who looks with the best, let's say, the best ability to really take off finally. So it's a trade-off. But But of course, it's like an easy answer to say funding. But what I mean is that everything we can look and sound, let's say, crazy. But if you don't take the risk, you will never get a new technology, never.
So let's talk about Mr. Funding now. Mr. Abramovich, can you share with us some successful cases in impact investment deploying solar energy solutions?
Yeah, no, so the technology, as the professor said, carries a certain amount of risk, and certain things are going to hit and certain things won't. But there's a lot of money to be made in Brazil and elsewhere in execution, right? You just talked about those million people who are living off-grid. Some of the most successful impact investments that we've made are in sub-Saharan Africa, right? There's 600 million people without access to power and 300 million who are paying such high prices for dirty diesel, right? So that's a market opportunity if you can crack that, and you can create a lot of value, and you can also lift a lot of dignity in people's lives. So we were the first to, my partners and I, in our power, to do solar fields in the Middle East. And then as we're doing the Middle East, and that's an economic model where you have an offtake agreement with the electric company for 20 years with profit built in, so it's worth financing and doing it. The hardest money is always the years that it took us to create the regulatory environment and to do the studies and everything. So in Africa, we decided to go for it. No one had ever succeeded to do utility scale solar, despite the need. And so we made some impact investments. It was blended finance, meaning we had some grant money with some of our seed money and then institutional money. And we built a field in Burundi. Burundi was last year supplying 10% of Burundi's power. Our equity sponsors are getting mid-teens IRR with a guarantee. That's one of the things that I'd love to see is first loss guarantees for the technology that the professor was talking about. That would help speed it up. But we get guarantees on our contracts with these poor countries. The first field we ever did was in Rwanda, supplying 6% of their power. It's quadruple bottom line. Our vision is, okay, we have to make some money, that's fine. We have impact investors tend to be a little more patient because they want to see things happen on the ground where it's most needed. But we also had an environmental bottom line. We took Rwanda from 40% on diesel down to 30. That's measurable, right? A humanitarian bottom line. We're at an orphan youth village, and part of our model is to cover the healthcare costs of 500 orphans for 25 years. And we had a development bottom line where normally when poor countries increase energy access, their emissions go up, their greenhouse gas emissions. In Rwanda, it was the first time we were able to decouple in Africa GNP growth. They continued 8% growth without any emissions growth. So we're quadruple bottom line. We're all impact investors. So we're mostly individuals. Average is $50,000 to $100,000 each. It takes time. My impact investors in Israel, for the first investors, it took 9 years until they started getting revenue, but they're getting it now for the next 20, 25 years. So that's like an annuity. And we hope to have a liquidity event, once we hit a gigawatt under management and development, we'll probably sell to a big energy company or a panel company or a closed-end fund. But that's all friends and family. We control our own destiny. And the fact that we've done this now twice in the poorest countries on the planet shows the way as well in Latin America, that money can be made using even existing technologies to get it out to more people.
So a follow-up question, how is the Brazilian market perceived by investors like the ones you work with, especially in the solar energy marketplace?
Look, we've looked at Brazil maybe 10 times over the last 10 years. We've come close a couple times. In the early years, you were having very cheap ethanol, and the price of solar was essentially too high. We then looked at a model where maybe we can go to remote areas, like you're talking about, you know, in Amazon, etc. Maybe replace diesel or bring electrification to places where the government doesn't know how to do it, and then it has value, maybe get paid enough to do that. Certainly, you're without getting political about anything else, the last administration was not climate friendly, and now that the price of solar has dropped so drastically, and it's actually not so complicated. I mean, once you get into trackers and things like that, it gets more, and storage, of course, it gets more complicated. But the basic solar, there's an economic rationale that is excellent. So we haven't seen the new policies yet under the new government. We're also trying to form a government here, so we know that takes some time. But in terms of size, absolutely. We know that there's different regions which have different benefits, but far away, it's really hard to understand the risks and then how to de-risk it. And we always would rely on potential local partners. I do think under the new administration and with concern about Amazon and climate justice being much more mainstream, Brazil has an opportunity to attract a lot more foreign investment and to partner with many of us.
And talking about partnership, let me turn to Professor Edgar. So in your view, how could a partnership between Brazil and Israel accelerate the development and deployment of new technologies like the ones you are working on?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I think, and actually we mentioned it in the previous question, that Brazil, since it's a much bigger country with much more resources than Israel, will be ideal to make some keep development and also fabrication in Brazil, because Israel do not have the resources to make it at a large scale, which means that technology can be developed and can go to a certain stage in Israel, but then needs to go to other places. And Brazil could be ideal for that, especially because of the resources, the lands that you have, and this actually could really be a very good partnership in those kind of terms.
So, Sawaya, based on what we have heard so far, how do you think our ABSOLAR members can benefit from development and deployment of all these new exciting technologies that are being developed in Israel and elsewhere?
Well, Susteras, first, it's been a great opportunity for myself, and I imagine our participants, to learn a little bit more about technological advancements from Israel, and also the opportunities to get closer to Israeli investors and investments. I would say on the one side, in fact, Brazil was in the past not a very well-known market, but last year it was the 5th largest solar PV market in the world. So maybe if we run again the numbers, Abramovich, we will find an opportunity, an interesting opportunity for international investors to look into Brazil. I also believe that the market has grown and evolved, but we still need a lot of capacity building, technical training, scaling up our workforce, Susteras, as we know that the market is growing exponentially, but the professionals that are working with PV are not growing at the same speed. So there is a bottleneck here, and this is an opportunity both in terms of education, so for the academy, the academics and the professors to help us, but also an opportunity for the market to help structure this workforce to get the projects on the ground. In terms of technologies, I would like to highlight 2 opportunities, and maybe Abramovich and Professor Leos could help us share a little bit of their insights on that. So how do you see floating photovoltaics? Is this something that we can look into, considering that Brazil has a lot of hydro reservoirs, for example, a lot of water availability, and about hybrid power plants? So if we combine solar with wind or with biomass or with hydro, can we take more advantage out of these investments as well? About off-grid solar, just to mention that Brazil has launched in 2020 a specific program called Mais Luz para a Amazônia, so more light to the Amazon region. So there is a budget already available of about 13 billion reais, so that's roughly $2.5 billion. So it's quite some resource to bring electricity to about 220,000 families, especially using renewable energy technologies and energy storage solutions in the 9 states of the Amazon region. So there are resources here that can be taken advantage of to help us bring some of these technologies and solutions to the market. Well, that said, Susteras, I'm actually quite motivated to hear more from our guests.
And I was also thinking about our colleagues from the supply chain working group that are always looking for ways of bringing more production here in Brazil, and I'm sure Professor Edgar and Mr. Brown will have a lot to comment on that. So, would you like to start, Professor?
Yeah, I can start from the technology point of view, which is a great idea, of course, to put PV on any water resources. The main problem when I look on it is that the sources are quite opaque, which means that the light cannot go through, and then what is below those cells cannot really live. And actually for that, we also have a technology that makes those cells semi-transparent, which means that the light can go through and you can still live in those water reservoir, which is something good, and actually it's fitting completely to our BIPV technology, because this is the same things that you can really control transparency and put them directly on the water. So I'm talking from the technology point of view, which is feasible, and especially if you say that you have a lot of water resources to use those kind of PV, so it's completely something that we need to think about.
Great. So on the floating, we love it here in the Middle East because it's not only that the water keeps the panels cooler, so they're more efficient, it prevents evaporation, and water is a precious resource world over, but especially in the Middle East. So that's definitely welcome. On the hybrid, we're going there. So we have a deal in Zambia on 71 megawatts, but have wind and solar. The sun, during the day goes like this. And just as it begins to set, the wind in this look, 5 years of World Bank wind mass, it's almost in perfect harmony. We probably just need a little bit of storage to even it out. But it's very site specific. So if you want to bring like investors, you want to attract, we need bankable studies already on the wind locations to be able to do that. I think that would help a lot. And in terms of the 9 states of the Amazon and $2.5 billion, well, look, if you have a local partner who knows how to pull the money out of the government, then I want to invite everybody who's interested. We built an off-grid village in the south of Israel, Kibbutz Keturah, the Arava Institute. It's off-grid village loaded with Israeli technologies on low-pressure drip irrigation, home biogas, the solar, the cell phone charging, the water purification, everything you need to be able to lift dignity if you're not going to be connected to the grid. So if someone out there listening is serious and knows how to get that $2.5 billion or a good portion of it, then I invite you to come to Israel and I'll show you exactly what you need. Yeah, we'll make a partnership. The other way is to partner with us is to invest in us. It doesn't have to be large sums, but if you're part of what we call our solar family, our solar mishpacha, you're going to learn everything we're doing. And part of what we love doing, and I'm glad you mentioned this, is the capacity building. We work with our foreign ministry, with Mashav, it's like foreign assistance training arm. And we have a certificate program for 3 weeks for energy entrepreneurs and officials from developing countries to come to Israel for a training program. During COVID, of course, it was on Zoom. It wasn't as good, but it continued. We have a program in Ethiopia that, and hopefully elsewhere, where we're going to build hybrid solar wind where we can at 10 universities, not only to power the university, but to be living laboratories to train the engineers. Exactly, so you guys can, so each country can scale up. So if there's anybody at a university who can do 10, 20 megawatts or a string of them, we're pretty focused in sub-Saharan Africa and our hands are definitely full. But these are strategies that if you're part of our solar mishpacha, you'll learn and you'll be able to bring back, and I think you'll make some good money and do some good. And the last message I have is coming out of the UN Climate Conference. We got to stop talking and we have to implement. It's all about executing fast. We have to do this quickly. The most vulnerable people are going to be disproportionately hit faster and more unjustly. And the economics are there, the technology is there, and you heard from the professor, even more is coming. So now let's do real projects on the ground and let's replicate and scale those successes with our technologies.
Excellent. So let's take some questions from the audience now, a number of interesting questions. The first one I have here is for Professor Lioz. Someone is also as excited as me about the possibility of charging the cell phones everywhere. So the question is, can you charge our phone with your technology anywhere, really? Like in our house, can we just put the phone on the table and the phone will charge itself with the normal indoor lighting? Is it something that is really going to happen?
Yes, completely. It's even quite easy. We are making it today quite routinely. So completely, you need to make your sources that will fit the light at your house, and it's something that we are working on. Yeah, it's really feasible. Mm-hmm.
So the next question is probably for the both of you. And of course, Sawai, if you want to chip in, you're welcome. So how do you see the relationship between solar generation in Brazil and hydrogen production for overseas consumption, for export, and especially in countries that have difficulty in producing clean energy? So do you believe it's viable for Brazil to become an exporter of green hydrogen?
Well, you heard my reservations and enthusiasm. If it's green hydrogen, yes, but if it's blue or gray, meaning they're using ammonia, they're using methane, no. We have to cut drastically methane emissions drastically by 2030, which means you got to cut out all uses where we can and switch to other sources. If it's green hydrogen, then yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity for Brazil. You have many ports. I've been to Sao Paulo, and you have good universities. You have a lot of land. You know, these are some elements that are, you have good sun in many places. So I think you're well positioned. But please don't fall into the trap of the gas and oil companies on non-green hydrogen.
So status. I wanted to chip in on that. So thank you, Abramovitz, for your thoughts on that. I think they're very relevant for Brazil, especially because in Brazil, we still have a lot of fossil fuel resources, right? But we know the Stone Age never ended because of lack of stones. So we have to think consciously about how we use our resources as well. And on that regard, Susteras, just wanted to mention very briefly that ABSOLAR has a specific task force on green hydrogen, and we have been following projects that are starting to mature in Brazil. One, for example, in the state of Bahia, with the production of green hydrogen from solar power, and another one in the state of Ceará, using wind power and the possibility of combining it with solar as well. Just one thing, maybe we won't necessarily export the hydrogen, the green hydrogen directly. Maybe we can transform this with technology into more elaborate products, such as green steel, green aluminum, green metallurgic and siderurgic products, and then export these aggregated valued products abroad, so that we have more added value and therefore also more profits into our country.
Brilliant, and make sure you put the branding on it, that it's you know, environmentally sustainable. Brilliant, you guys will take over the world with those products. I hope you succeed.
So moving to a question on technology and especially on bifacial modules, but I'd like to add to expand the question. Dennis is asking, in your views, is bifacial module something that you can just replace the normal modules by bifacial modules? Is something that will always work? Is always the case? But I'm going to expand the question and to include Professor Edgar here as well. So, what other module technologies do you see in addition to bifacial modules that will replace in the near future the immediate application of the current standard modules?
Yeah, I think the bifacial is one kind of technology which is already done, especially in the current sources that we have. The other technology, I think, in the PV should find, should find the niche in things that you didn't think that the PV can be there. Like you think today when we were talking about solar cells that you are going to put those modules outside in the desert or in a place when you need some area to generate really high capacity of energy. But if we really want to push the photovoltaic in all directions and to really use more and more renewable energy, we need to think on more niche to put it. Like I gave examples before, but you need to put it in other places. Like we said, charging the phone, but this is like a small example. But for RG photovoltaic, for buildings, especially you have buildings today, with glasses surrounding them, like very high buildings. And everything's there, you're not taking advantage of the sun, nothing. I mean, you don't have a roof to put your solar cells there, so it's not relevant. You need something to put on the facets, on the coating of these buildings. And in order to do that, you need something that will give the light to go through. Of course, you pay the efficiency by that. You cannot get a very high efficiency if you make it semi-transparent, but you can control it. And even if it's when I'm talking about even 5% efficiency, it's something for this kind of area that you don't have even today. I mean, we need to think on everything, but I think we need to think on some niche for the photovoltaic. Then it will get to our routinely daily life.
And Yosef, is raising funds currently easier because people are more interested in sustainability issues? We are seeing ESG as the new hype of the moment. It's something that it's changed, or in the end, everyone is looking at the return rates and everything else is just for show.
Look, ESG is very mixed because a lot of the big ESG funds, when you dig down deeper, it has a lot of the same polluters, and you have to dig much deeper. There is a ESG fund here called Value Squared, which has done, I think, the most research on all public equities, but they go very deep to make sure that it really is real environmental, social, and governance issues, and not just cosmetic. But a good amount of ESGs tend to be cosmetic. In terms of there's a lot of money on the move right now for two reasons. One, there's a divest invest movement, meaning pressure on banks, on pension funds, on universities to move money from dirty energy, right? There's $43 trillion that's being divested over the next number of years from sovereign wealth funds and others from dirty energy to clean energy. So you have that movement, because who really wants to tell their grandchildren, yeah, we made a killing destroying the world for you? And the other thing is, frankly, is a lot of those carbon sources will be stranded assets. Between carbon taxes, between, frankly, renewable is cheaper in most cases. And so it's not a good long-term investment anyway. Money is starting to move into startups, into projects. There's a gap right now. There's a market failure in what's called project preparation money, right? So, really, you just said, wow, $2.5 billion for the Amazon. We have all the technologies that could make it work, right? But there's a big step between using our technologies, and just tell me when you're coming, and tapping the money, because you're going to have to do surveys, right? You're going to have to look at the, mini grid prep, environmental impact, social impact. Are you going to negotiate who controls the small, water pump, solar powered water pump, and work with the cultures? And so the countries and international development financial institutions, they've forgotten that you need that step to de-risk and to plan well before the big money can come in. So we're trying to correct that market failure right now. Sometimes it can be grant money, it can be concessionary financing, it can be loans that are repaid once the project is up and working. They could be like in first position. So we're hearing about trillions. $100 trillion is going to move between now and 2030. We just want a little part of it.
And thank you, Manuel. Professor Leos, Manuel is asking here. He's interested in your scientific side of your work. So he's wondering where he can find some papers on the research you are conducting there, your publications. Is it something you can point him where to find your publications?
Yeah, I think he can find in our website of our research group. If you just Google my name, so you will find first the website of the research group, and then you will find all the projects, publications, everything. So also some contacts. So if you
is there a way we can put our contact information if people want to see the videos or see the technologies or follow up in any other way? I don't know how to put the email in the chat, but I'm happy to do so, or if the moderator can do that.
And if you let us, we can also send to everyone that's subscribed to be part of this talk. We can send them by email your contact information and your links to your websites.
Right. Just let me know when you're coming. Just let me know when you're coming.
Good. So there's a very interesting question here. Well, all the questions are very interesting, but this one is, I think, it's not an easy one to answer, which means these are the ones that are more interesting, I think. So. One aspect of this technology development is about making everything more efficient and therefore cheaper. So what are the main roadblocks that we have to reduce the cost even further? I mean, have we reached the lowest possible point for photovoltaic technology in terms of costs and efficiency? Or are we about to see a significant breakthrough in the next couple of years? And where is this breakthrough coming from?
Yeah. You want me, Joel Yosef, to answer?
Well, look, it's what you said, Professor, where the first prototypes, everything is expensive, and you need, whether it's from the Innovation Authority here, or you need those kinds of research grants. And then the first ones. What we've seen with the solar cells will be true for any of these technologies. Once you get to certain economies of scale, right, and Moore's law kind of kicks in, you're able to do that. I think solar cells, maybe they won't get much cheaper, but they'll get more efficient for the same price, right? So there'll be those kinds of innovations. We're seeing that same drop now in storage costs that we saw in panel prices. But the truth is, I mean, it'd be great to have all things even cheaper, but right now, solar plus storage is viable, profitable, cheaper than most fossil fuels, and any improvements just adds to our bottom lines. But give the professor the research grants and the pilot money that he needs, because that will accelerate it going out there. And then groups like us, if we order a lot of them, the price per transparent panel will go down. Professor, is that okay?
Yeah, and I can tell from my side, I mean, when you change the technology and you change the materials, so it makes it, if you do it correctly, it makes it cheaper, which means that this is what we are doing. From the beginning, our baseline is to make a low-cost solar cell, which means not just the materials that will be low-cost, also the fabrication and everything. Also the machines that you need to make those solar cells, the fabrication line and everything. if you don't require very specific and very harsh condition to make those cells, the cost will go down. So it's not necessarily just the material that will be cheap or not will be cheap. And this is the second generation. Yeah, sorry.
No, I apologize, Professor. I just wanted to also bring some insights into this discussion. In my past life, I worked with research and development, and I had the opportunity to work with 3 different solar technologies, right? And what I've been seeing from past years until now, Susteras, is that on the one hand, we see not disruptive, but gradual evolutions on the technology, and they are coming on many fronts. One part is increasing efficiency, as Abramovitz well pointed. The other part is increasing the production volume so that we can produce this a larger amount of solar modules with the same costs. And this is happening. Our industry is growing immensely in terms of total installed capacity of the industry. And a third area is where we reduce the cost of the solar cell per se. For example, replacing materials that are more expensive, such as silver for copper or other components that we want to replace, making the solar cells last longer, or reducing their consumption of raw materials. So instead of using X grams, you use a smaller amount of grams of silicon, for example, which is relatively complex to produce and expensive. So there are all these areas that are working at the same time, as well as new chemistry, so new combinations of elements to produce new materials and to give you interesting results on terms of light absorption and conversion into electricity and so on and so forth. There is one important challenge, which is stability. So some of the new innovative technologies such as perovskites, they have high efficiency already. It's similar to silicon solar cell efficiency. They use less material. They're easier to produce because you can print them, but they still lack stability. So they last only a few years before they start to lose very significantly their efficiency and their production capacity, right? So these are some of the challenges that we have, but also some of the opportunities. So in my view, we are still far away from the bottom of the price curve. So we still have room to reduce costs and increase, therefore, the market opportunities for solar into new applications and deployments. But Abramovitz is correct. I mean, the technology today is already one of the cheapest in the world. In Brazil, it's the cheapest way to produce electricity ever. So we have to take advantage of this as it is and keep pushing for new investments in technology, research, and innovation as well.
Which brings me to the final question I have from the audience, and it's only final because we are running out of time. Experiences like the one in the Negev desert with the thermal solar plant, something that is replicable, or is this something that it's never going to be competitive against photovoltaics?
Look, Israel created the solar thermal, 2 ways of making energy from the sun, heat and light. But there won't be any more solar towers in Israel, or I think almost anywhere else. Its elegance, of course, was that it was able to get so hot it could do storage, molten salts or similar. But again, there's so many different storage technologies now. The solar plus standard storage, whether it's batteries, compressed air, flywheels, pump storage, whatever it is cheaper. It's already cheaper. So. And you're not going to get economies of scale in solar thermal under the current technologies. Maybe someone out there, maybe the professor is brewing something up in his lab in the back. But it's going to be light more than heat. It's going to drive green electrification.
Okay, thank you very much. So we are running out of time here today. I'm going to ask for your final thoughts. And again, thank you very much for sharing your time with us. Professor Edgar, thank you very much for being with us today.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yes, and just, a final comment, which maybe I said, I think really in order to move ahead, we need to take some risk. And this is maybe direct, like a statement to the funding and everything. Of course, We need to look in thousand eyes what is the technology, but we need to take some risk, even if we have a little bit stability issue, like Rodrigo said. But it's something that we need to take. If we will not try, we will never know.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Abramovich. Thank you again for being with us today. Your closing remarks, please.
First of all, thank you very much. We've been tracking Brazil for a while. I did not know that you're the 5th largest market. It seems like you guys think you're learning a lot, with a new lens. And just let's marvel at, how interconnected we are. I had to be on a Brazilian, call to be able to say to the professor, I want to see your IP and maybe I can help you raise some money. So even though he's probably just up the street from over here. And the invitation, of course, to partner. So we're looking forward to hear from some of you if there's real opportunities, because the whole world is going to have to do this. The whole world's going to have to move. And the more that we can kind of cross-pollinate, the faster we'll go. And I think also we'll all make some good money.
Great. So I'm going to switch back to Portuguese now for my final greetings here. Sawaia, super obrigado aqui por dividir essa conversa comigo. De novo aqui, foi um prazer conversar sobre um negócio super legal de tecnologia, desenvolvimento e oportunidades de negócio aqui no Brasil, junto com Israel.
Susteras, eu que agradeço, um prazer enorme. Queria em especial fazer um agradecimento aqui aos nossos palestrantes. Thank you so much, Abramovich and Professor Leos, for the opportunity. It was great to learn from your experience and to also be motivated by the challenges you brought forward for us. Agradecer, Susteras, em especial você que nos ajudou a fazer a ponte do Brasil com Israel, com os nossos palestrantes, com a Universidade de Jerusalém, né? E que permitiu com que esse evento pudesse acontecer. Dizer que a gente está aqui de portas abertas para receber investidores internacionais, empresas internacionais, acadêmicos interessados, e esse é um dos papéis da ABSOLAR, ajudar a dividir informação e trazer esse conhecimento para que o mercado possa utilizar e com isso ajudar a Solar a avançar cada vez mais no Brasil. Foi um prazer poder dividir esse momento com vocês e obrigado pela oportunidade.
Obrigado, Sawaia. Do meu lado, eu queria agradecer toda a equipe da ABSOLAR que ajudou a viabilizar essa live, Natália, que ajudou a montar aqui essa estrutura, o Ernesto, que ajudou aqui a moderar as perguntas, a Daniele, que ajudou a fazer a organização, a divulgação, a Beatriz também ajudou a fazer tudo isso. Obrigado especial também para a Dana, da Universidade Hebraica de Jerusalém, aqui no Brasil, que fez as pontes todas, permitiu fazer isso, e dizer que a gente já está preparando a próxima live também para falar com outras entidades, com outras empresas, para aproximar ainda mais Brasil e Israel, para falar um pouco ainda mais desse mundo, desse enorme mundo de desenvolvimento de tecnologia e oportunidades de negócio. Esse talk vai estar gravado no canal da ABSOLAR no YouTube, para vocês poderem assistirem, reassistirem, compartilharem com os amigos, e espero vê-los na próxima vez. Obrigado a todos e tenham todos um bom dia.